change is that Beekeeper is now referred to as DXP, Digital Experience Platform Journey Creator, which is also referred to as Digital Journeys. And this is after the synchronous acquisition of the Honeybee software. The first change is that Beekeeper is now referred to as DXP Journey Creator, Digital Journeys after the synchronous acquisition of the Honeybee software. The major changes are template integration as UX configuration, or the UI toolkit, has been expanded for a more flexible UI configuration experience for digital journey. A user now has the ability to create custom template, then data bind, configure them directly inside their journeys. The feature to create an application flow has been available in prior versions to 4.1. Now, since the templating system has changed, your application flows created in Journey Creator will now reflect on the front end too. You can order your features with decision blocks and logic, just as the feature to add application flows to your journey has been available in previous versions. The Deploy tab in App Builder will allow you to publish or push your model to a secondary environment such as QA or test, or allowing the model to be pushed to a production environment. Transforms. During the integration process of their application, users can now transform their data, inputs and outputs with the use of Blockly blocks and logic. This feature has been embedded into the integrate section of Journey Creator. Conditional mappings. You can now specify per property if the data response returned from a service integration is conditional or optional. This allows specific data models which tailor towards your application's scenario. Also, in addition, third-party and user display behavior for data type has now changed. Another addition to 4.1 will be new data types. Apart from the familiar 4 data types for a property, string, boolean, number, and integer, 3 more data types have now been added. These are base64, text, and image. There are also general changes that have been made in 4.1, and these are: when adding a new API call service to a step, there is no longer a need to specify an argument as a parameter. In 4.0, the need to manually match the step as an argument has changed. In addition, when adding a new API call service to a step, there is no longer a need to specify an argument as a parameter. In 4.0, the need to manually match the step has been removed. In addition, the option to add a product microservice as a step has also been removed in favor of simply being called an API call. This simplifies the semantic use of the term API call, and you can still, of course, connect to a product microservice. You can now choose from more than 10 work streams on an application from the drop-down menu, as the button now has a scroll bar. Previously, once a user adds more than 10 work streams to a project, they will be cut off from the selection of the workstream section of Journey Creator. In order to select from a newly created workstream, the user would have had to create a new application or delete an existing workstream from an application. In addition, we can now deploy to a test environment as before. The feature was available in 4.0, but now it's functional. And the UI on the steps profile has now been revamped and has been made a lot clearer. Formats have been deprecated, even though the use of it is still available. The UI option to search for a format in Data Editor is also still there. There is a new section called UI Hints, and this is used to give a hint to a front-end UI client. Preview logs have now been enabled in preview mode, and the pause and resume functionality has been enhanced as well. There are a few minor improvements also. To deploy an app model to a specific environment before publishing to a production environment, you will need to visit App Builder, and once you've selected App Builder, you click on version and then click on the deploy tab. From here, you can select an environment from the drop down menu to deploy your JSON model to. This way we prevent live environment changes which can go down south very quickly if something goes wrong at runtime. There are two ways to assign a template to a step. On step creation, selecting the template from a drop-down list, or after editing a step, clicking on the settings icon and selecting an existing template from the drop-down list. We can now also configure our templates directly from our steps in Journey Creator, enhancing an already very powerful feature on the platform. Let's see an out-of-the-box experience using the simple form. This form consists of 3 configurable fields: subtitle, submit label, and title. After entering the information on this step, for example, it will now be reflected on the front-end client. Here is a demo of how we have configured a simple form template inside of a proof of concept for BT. All of the styling and all of the layout configuration will be handled by the client's code. Building on the simple form template, we also have another example called CTA, meaning click to action, which generates a component or multiple components. Let's create a new step in your own feature, and this time it will be easier for us to select a template on step creation rather than production. Another handy feature with the 4.1 update is the introduction of data transforms. This feature has been built into the Integrate section of Journey Creator. Let's visit the Integrate tab now. Here is an example of the weather REST-HTTP Shadow Connect implementation of the OpenWeather API that we used earlier on in this course. If we were again to draw down the tree into the mappings, we can now see that we have our request object, we have our request params, and our response mappings. Do you remember how the map for the input, or how to map the input and output for an API? This time I'm going to connect the units property to the model, as in drag to connect like before, and this will of course show that we are sending information from our ADM, as in our application data model, to the API eventually. To demonstrate, let's hover over the end connection and you'll notice how a plus button appears. This is how we can start our transforms. Just to recap, what are transforms and where are they used? Transforms are used to transform or manipulate the data on our requests and responses inside Data Mapper. We specify the inputs, or the input, which is basically where the data is coming from, and the output too, where the transformed data is being sent. For a technical description of transforms or the feature itself, have a look at Confluence, where we will post, or a link is available to a more detailed demonstration of how transforms have been implemented in Journey Creator, Beekeeper, or the DXP platform. Now that you have a basic understanding of what they are and what they can be used for, I'm going to show you a quick example. Now, my goal is to make every single request known that we want units to be in uppercase. So after we have mapped the units property to the output, you will then click on the plus button and then a model will be shown, allowing us to add a new transform. The input box allows us to specify the inputs from the input model. If there is more than one input to a single output, or basically, for example, if we wanted to join a first name string property and a last name string property together to make a default password, for example, for a user, we can specify the multiple inputs by clicking on Add Input Parameter. The same could be done for output as well. For this example as well, since we only want to transform one property, we should have only one input parameter and one output parameter. Another thing we can do is use logic here inside our transforms. After clicking on the editor tab, a familiar screen will be shown, and now we have 2 default blocks on the canvas, and they are called input 1 and output 1. Here are some tips and tricks for the 4.1 Beekeeper or Journey Creator update. Tip number 1. In order to view a journey on the front end using the URT or the DXP seed client repo, it has to have an application flow. So basically, when creating an application in Journey Creator with version 4.1, the client or the UI toolkit expects to have an application flow defined. If you do not have that, you will not see your journey on the front end. You will be able to see the process. You will be able to see the progress of your journey in state, but it may display incorrectly elsewhere if the app is missing or the application flow is missing with the necessary configuration. The way edit links work have changed in 4.1 too. Create links are now important than edit links. Prior to 4.1, journeys would work in a linear flow. They still do, but edit links are not prioritized anymore. In 4.1, the client backend will follow all create links until there are no more left. So for example, if you had a flow with 5 steps and each of those steps had a create link and one of them had an edit link, it will follow, 4 of them had a create link and then one of them had an edit link. It will follow all 4 create steps and it will ignore the step with the edit link. Once all create links have been visited, the journey is now done. So during the journey, that will mean that the edit links are now ignored. The functionality still exists in the Journey Creator preview, but the results of the URL toolkit at the moment may vary. Tip number 3. The order in which you create your steps will dictate the order of flow inside your feature, which is basically on the UI toolkit client, so on the front end. Currently with the 4.1 DXP client, in order for you to have your own desired flow, you will need to order your steps in accordance to when you created your steps inside your business feature. So for example, for this feature displayed here, the order creation was number 1, feature 1, number 2, feature 2, and then after that I created feature 3, and then after that I created feature 4. So ideally, if I wanted to move from feature 2 to feature 1 rather than in the order I've created it, then it would not work. But as I created feature 1 first, feature 1 will come first in my flow. Tip number 4. This is a very simple tip, but please remember to order your services based on the state, as in your rules, based on the state first, and then after that you add your services. So rules or business rules first, then service calls after.